turn it on, and then we can get started. And yeah, we'll see if anyone's even chatting. Okay, it's up. Cool. All right. So Alejandro, right?
Yes.
How are you today?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. So do you want to give a brief introduction of yourself?
Yes, my name is Alejandro Cohen. I'm the executive director of Dublab Radio. Dublab is a nonprofit radio station based here in Los Angeles.
Awesome. And so did you help co-found Dublab or start it yourself?
No. I was involved from the beginning. I was part of the community that started when Dublab started broadcasting. However, I became the general manager in around 2006 and became the executive director about 6 years ago.
Okay. Wow. And how does, what does executive director entail?
Well, the executive director oversees the programming, the general administrative side of the organization, and the fundraising part. So essentially, you hopefully, if funding allows, you have people that handle that, and you oversee that, and you steer the organization in the direction you think is best for it.
Yeah, and what
in an ideal world, but from there, obviously, you end up wearing a lot of hats and a lot of overlap in everything.
Yeah. How big is your executive team?
Well, we are a team. Currently, we are a team of 7 people. Yeah, that it's full time. So not everyone is involved directly with the radio station. Over the years, we've been around for 22 years. So yeah. over the years, we've expanded to other type of programming, and so we have a couple of people that handle those. They handle those programs, and not necessarily Dublab Radio per se.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. When you first started out with Dublab, I'm sure you had even more hats. Like you were probably doing even more stuff at the beginning. What was your what were your main tasks when you first got started with the station?
Well, yes, it was a lot more informal. I think it just like the natural trajectory of most organizations, Dublab was more of a collective. Well, not at the very beginning. I'm not going to focus on the very beginnings, but I'll focus kind of later on after year number 3 or 4 of the organization. Dublab was more of a collective where pretty much everyone does everything. And then over time, as the organization grows, there's starting to be more of a hierarchy and positions for the organization. So when I joined as general manager, it was essentially just Mark McNeil Frosty, who is the founder and was the director, and myself, and we pretty much did it all. And that is when I say all, is everything from sweeping floors to and then over time, yes, you as budget allows, you bring people in that can handle those things for you, and you can focus on more the overarching vision of the organization. But it doesn't mean that up to these days, you don't find yourself sweeping floors or things like that. It is a labor of love. It is something that we all put everything in there.
Yeah. And so when you started out, was Dublab doing, what was the programming like in the first 5 years? Was it just live radio from the station?
Yes. Well, yes, it was. And at the beginning, we're talking 1999. The idea of internet radio or online radio was really not formed, right? Dublab was Dublab, along with a handful of other organizations, were out there defining what internet radio is. So obviously, we came from college radio, so there was a hint of that college radio culture, But there was not a clear definition. So, for example, Dublab, if you look at our first website in 1999, it was a sort of like a proto boiler room, right? In fact, what's his name? Blaze from Boiler Room was a fan of Dublab, and part of why he started Boiler Room was inspired by what we do, right? And he was,
I know that. That's crazy.
yeah, and you'll find that in many other stations that they're like, oh yeah, we're fans of Dublab, and so you see that template. And again, it was Dublab and a handful of others, So when you say, oh, were you broadcasting live? There was a bit of a yes and no. The story is a little more complex and more convoluted on how it went and how we define this new voice. But Dublab was definitely out there forging the template for what we see across the globe on online radio. And, I'm saying this obviously not out of trying to claim something, but it's just the realities. We started in 1999 when there were no radio stations, no other stations, and it was us and a few others. I remember Beta Lounge in San Francisco, who were really good friends of ours. I think there was another one called Groove Tech back in the day. There were just a few, and they were all, as far as I know, majority of them were all in the West Coast, which it kind of makes sense when you think about it. That it all happened in the West Coast.
Yeah, that makes total sense, and it's cool to hear you say that, because when we founded Verge FM, it was just like a few people in the Midwest in Columbus, Ohio, and we were like, there's nothing like this. Like, we need something near where we live, and we definitely were looking at the coast, like, for inspiration for everything, and just trying to figure out what the heck to do. So yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, what online radio is, it continues to evolve. And it's different from terrestrial radio because you're speaking to audiences not just in a region, but across the world, right? You're really catering to a global community. So there were questions of, for example, scheduling things. Do you schedule them thinking of your city? You schedule things based on something else, because you really want to try to speak to your community, but also speak to the community that is across the globe. So yeah, it continues to evolve, and it's definitely not a direct translation of an FM, of a college radio station or an independent radio station, but on the internet. It's different.
Yeah. What was so you kind of said it morphed out of like college radio. What was like the deciding factor? Do you remember like what made you guys kind of go forward and create Dublab? Like, was there something going on in your community that you were like, let's do this?
Well, at the time, there's a lot of there's a lot of things that took us to where we are now. At the time, Mark McNeil and a handful of other people. Mark was the music director of the college radio station at KUSC, and not KUSC, sorry, at USC, the university. And I forgot what their call letters were. I think these days the iteration of that station is KXSC, I believe. But at the time, Mark was the music director, and the station was operating out of USC, but they weren't fully licensed. And when the FCC shut them down, there was clearly a need for radio, but there was no access to the airwaves, right? The public didn't have access to the airwaves. And this goes back to, I believe, 1996, I think, or maybe 1999. Don't quote me on it. Sorry, I don't have the documents in front of me. But it goes to a legislation that passed where the FCC essentially stripped the vast majority of community stations of their licenses, and it was essentially a move by Clear Channel, I believe, that they lobbied for it. So there was no access. There was an explosion of pirate radio because the people people didn't have access to the airwaves anymore to, any regular folk that wanted to just go and broadcast on FM, even though the airwaves technically belonged to the public, they had no way to, there was not even a way to apply to an FM station, right? So, so at the time, there was this idea that I said, hey, you know what? I heard that you could plug a turntable to the internet and you can stream sound. So meaning that someone else can press play on their computer and they'll hear that sound live, and that seemed pretty novel at the time. It felt like, oh, wow. So you could do kind of like a radio. You can stream audio, right? Even the word streaming audio was kind of like, what word do you use, right? And Dublab started out of that idea. They're like, you know what? Let's take it into our own hands and let's stream on the internet. And I think the very early iterations of what Mark was doing before Dublab was, I think even with Dublab, and again, it's not so clear the early days of the station because I wasn't involved, but I think we had to get some even custom-made software to stream audio because there wasn't any standard software out there that you could use. And it was just very much kind of like, well, I guess this is what you do, right? But it wasn't a territory that was defined. So so when I say that it makes sense that the West Coast is where it all started, is is that idea of the West Coast, sorry, or the West of the United States being the Wild West, right? In a way, and in a way, it was kind of a Wild West of media. It's a new territory. It's just like you just go and you just define it, and that's how it happened. It really came out of a need of not having access to FM, and that's how it really got started. It was a response to that.
Yeah, that is so interesting. That's really cool. I was wondering, and you kind of brought this up, like, so it sounds like there was some proprietary software you had to use or to have someone make for you. If you don't mind sharing, if not, that's fine. Like what type of softwares do you use right now for streaming?
Well, we use the standards ones, we use Air. Oh, geez, this is because I'm less and less involved with the day to day. I am not so, but it's what is it? My goodness, it's embarrassing. I should know all these things, but we have our IT guy that would be able to. Yeah, sorry. I know that. Also, you catch me on a Monday, on a Sunday morning. I'm still having my coffee, so my brain is not fully.
You're totally fine.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, we use pretty standard things these days. I know at the beginning, essentially, eventually we ended up using Real Player at the time. And then, and we used to do the archiving of our things on CDs. We used to burn CDs. So we had spools and spools and spools and spools of CDs at the time, which eventually I was the one that ended up putting in hard drives before they stopped reading. And we're still up to this day, still putting up some of those archives that are not up there.
Oh my goodness. I can't even imagine.
Yeah. The early years, I think the first 2 years of Dublab Radio are in the Smithsonian Museum as the archive of early internet radio. I remember they reached out to keep an archive of that.
That is sweet. I'm going to check that out. That's super interesting.
Yeah.
What have you found software related, but this isn't about like the streaming as much. I have a few actually. So one is what are your kind of means of communication amongst the team? What do you guys use? Just out of curiosity.
Well, we use Slack. That's a new thing that we started using. And then we use this other program, Monday, for more like project management. And then, and it's very generational too. I'm the old guy there, and I'm okay with emails. Emails work just fine for me. However, the staff really thrives on those things like Slack and all that. I have my. I have my questions and all that, ultimately, I think these are all tools that are very useful in the times of the pandemic where things are still somewhat in a hybrid of working in person versus remotely and all that. But I don't know, there's nothing like just being in person in the same room to me. But that's me. That's just my own personal preference.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And definitely when there's something important to talk about, call them on the phone or meet with them in person. You know?
Definitely. I agree with that. And what are your main, do you know like any, could you explain like the communications with your team and your like residents? Do people submit their shows like on email? Do you use something else? We've been adapting the way that we do that in the past year. We've only existed for a year, and we're just so curious like what other people do to like get their submissions from their hosts.
Yeah, well, there's I know we use WeTransfer for a lot of things, and I know this sounds like an advertisement, right, of all these products, you know.
It's okay. Yeah.
I'm just sharing the tools that have worked for us. We use WeTransfer. We have a pro account, and that has worked really well for us in terms of managing sessions, and that's the way it's been working. Rachel, who's our program director, she's been with Dublab for a couple of years now. She's been doing a fantastic job at keeping things pretty organized and setting up hard deadlines for the DJs, right? When you work with DJs, you work with a community that is creative, and by nature, any creative community can be a bit chaotic, right? We're not accountants. We're not, bank tellers, or insurance brokers. We deal with a community that is creative, that is out late at night, that is finding inspiration in unusual things and activities, or questionable activities sometimes, and with that it comes the compromise of being flexible and striking a balance between flexibility and certain rigidity of okay, you have to send this by this time, right? And I think Rachel has been doing a really good job in trying to walk that fine line where you turn demands, but again, you can't complain too much, because if you have an issue with that, with people not someone's being quite together, then you're working with the wrong population. You're in the wrong industry, So you have to be understanding and work with the people you're working with. So that's what we do. But we use WeTransfer, and then people also have their own ways, right? Some people use Dropbox and they send us a link and all that. I can't wait until we're all in person, broadcasting live again. To me, that is the way to do it. And we try to, the pandemic, with the Delta variant, with Omicron, and now with us moving to a new space, it's been an on and off of people coming in and out. Like, we're opening, we're closing, we're opening, we're closing. So, once we're open, we really want people to start coming back again in person and do set in there, because that is the other half of our mission, that you don't see, that is not even on paper. It's what happens at your space, right? The interactions that happen there and the connections that happen in the community by doing your show in person.
Yeah, that's so cool. I think that's like we're like kind of the opposite, where we started during COVID. So like most of it is totally remote. There's people from all over the place that are sending shows in ahead of time. We set up, just for other people that are listening and are curious, we set up like Google Classrooms, and we basically make our like submissions like an assignment in like a classroom, which is crazy. I mean, it
that's
works.
Cool.
Yeah, cool. It works really well. But it just blew my mind that some people do it via email. But you guys, it sounds like you guys used to just have like everyone in person. So this is temporary for you.
Yeah. And again, also what happens too when you're around for so long is that you had to adapt to also people that are used to certain things, especially people of certain age, people my age or older, you're settled in some way. So someone comes that is a new person and is very, very kind of digital native. and they try to implement things, and some of them are like, I don't know how to do this, so you have to, as time goes by, it's always easy when you're new and everyone in your community is the same time. It's as if you're building a new building. Obviously, the new building is going to come with setup for internet or for this or for that with these modern appliances and all that. But when you're of certain age, it's an old building, and it's like, we built it for another era, and you have to start adapting it. So it's a bit of that for us. It gets a little more complex.
Yeah, definitely. And I noticed on your site that like one of the goals is having diverse collaborators and DJs. What have been some of the ways that you find people of like more diverse genres that specialize in diverse genres? And also I was interested in how you like specifically called out having DJs of a different age ranges. Like how have you found, how have you recruited those people?
Yeah, well, I mean, on one hand, finding diversity in Los Angeles is a fairly easy task, right?
Yeah.
LA is a very diverse place by nature. However, at the same time, you could easily fall in the trappings of the city and of some of the trappings in the city where you're not diverse, right? And not even intentionally by default, right? I think it's important to get out there. I think it's important to get out of your comfort zone. I think it's important to listen to the quietest voices in the city and give those voices a chance, the ones that no one else is listening to, and be able to identify originality. So how do we recruit people? How do we bring people to represent different parts of this, the wide spectrum, right, in our community? Definitely, I myself and pretty much everyone at Dublab cannot bring ourselves to care about social media numbers, popularity, and all that. I just cannot, I never look at that ever, I don't do it out of like an intentional response. I really just focus on the work they do. So someone may come to the station, maybe a well-known person and all that, but let's say, just to give you an example, they do a dance show, right? And we already have 15 dance shows at the station. Yeah. Cool, come for a guest set, but I cannot give you a regular show because, we need to open it to other types of music. And someone that, have, barely played once in their life, but come and they do something interesting and original, and you meet them and they're like, oh, you have an interesting voice. Would you like to do a show in Dublab, right? They don't even have an Instagram account. They don't even, that's okay. We don't, it's really focused on that. So I think it's important to listen to those quiet corners in your community that no one else is paying attention to. Yeah.
That's
yeah.
That's great. That's a really good response. Thank you for that. That was really good. And yeah, it's interesting. There's so, as time has progressed, I'm sure everyone on your team's noticed, it's like the concept of like being a DJ is like morphing with like being an influencer and like all of this other stuff on social media. And sometimes it's hard to like just know like what's what, yeah. That's
radio is a medium that is not a new medium. When you walk into creating a radio station, radio is not a new kid on the block. Radio, in fact, radio is really old. It's in fact something that by all means doesn't need to exist. And over the years, the threats of radio disappearing continue to baffle people on why does radio still exist, So for example, I remember when Dublab first started, there was an obvious radio culture, right? Then you start seeing things like Spotify, right? And you're like, well, now there's no need for radio, people can just, and then you start seeing the kind of the Uberification of radio, right? Where anyone can just like sign up to some service and in 5 minutes we'll have a radio station, right? Quote unquote. So radio has had an interesting evolution and has been really adaptable to the times and being able to survive and be resilient. So when you talk about social media, when you talk about the latest trend, when you talk about TikTok, when you talk about Spotify and YouTube and this and that and this and that, radio is this quiet medium that is this reliable little wheel that will always be turning, and you see it in the times of the pandemic that you just knowing that it's there existing, alone has a lot of value in the community. So if tomorrow your community, something happens and people go to Verge FM for that sense of community and they see that you're no longer there, they would freak out. They're like, what's happening here? Why are the lights off? Are they there every single day obsessing over it? Maybe not, but they like to know that you're there doing your thing, right?
Yeah.
And I think radio is really just about that, radio is the art of repetition. It's the art of opening the curtains every single day, whether or not someone is listening to it or not. You go and you do it, right? And therefore, there's not a huge need to understand the changes in time, right? You're doing this traditional art form, this almost meditative activity where you put your entire heart into it, even when it doesn't make any sense. You do it, and there's times that it is for Dublab is the same. We've been around for 22 years, and there's times where we've had an issue with the stream, and the stream is down for about 30 minutes, and we're not getting phone calls and emails and people freaking out. I'm like, oh, I guess we're down and for a full 30 minutes and no one is freaking out. And it's like, should we be concerned that no one cares? But it's like, no, it's okay. It's what it is, Even when no one's listening, if you're running a movie theater, you will still play that movie, even if there's one person sitting inside, right?
Yeah.
And radio is kind of the same. So yes, of course, you want to understand. You want to stay somewhat engaged with the trends. You want to handle social media and have accounts and try to have a voice in there. But ultimately, you don't want any of those things defining you, right? You want to use those new things as a way to help you, but you're not going to let those things define you.
Yeah, that was great. Off of the topic of social media, what are some, these are pretty generic questions, but like, what are some things you wish you knew or that you think your team wish you knew sooner? Like what are some of these just like big insights that you learned in your years with Dublab that you would like to pass on to other people trying to run or form a radio station?
Sorry, was this specific with social media or just with radio?
Just anything. Yeah, doesn't have to be social.
So what are the things that we learned that we would have done differently?
Yeah.
I don't know, to be honest. I think and sorry, just to kind of go back to your question, is this in relation to the pandemic or just in general?
It could be, it was in general, but like if you want to make it about the pandemic since it's recent.
No, just trying to understand how to answer it properly. You know what? There's stations. There are stations, and I'm not going to name names. I think there's stations that have been more calculating in their moves and the features that they have to build a brand, right? And those are decisions that are made with very specific goals, which is to build an audience, to create a community, but create a community around a brand and create a community around something that is financially profitable, right?
Yeah.
A lot of those features, you know, on those websites, on those organizations, I think they come with those calculations in mind. Dublab for being who we are, being that we're a nonprofit community organization, never had those things, right? And never embraced practices that seem towards that, right? Out of like subtracting something out of the community in order to benefit. We want to give instead of subtract. However, sometimes I think we sold ourselves short by being so laid back, if you want to put it, or so true to our vision. And I think learning from the more commercial organizations out there could have been beneficial to be better to the community, to have better features, right? So that would be, you know, I'm kind of speaking in abstract terms. I don't want to kind of point fingers, you know, or anything like that, you know, but I think what I'm trying to say is that sometimes the nonprofit sector could benefit from some of the lessons learned from the for-profit sector. As much as the for-profit sector all the time, especially in the past 10 years, have been appropriating the message of community building from the nonprofit sector. But, you know, when you're for-profit, and I feel really strongly about this, when you're for-profit, you're not community building, you're building a brand, you know, you are building something that you could make money out of. And if it's not a 501c3, if it's a private organization, it doesn't belong to the public, you know, it belongs to someone that can turn around and sell it. And there's nothing wrong with it, you know, but it's not a community. It's a, you know what I mean? You know, when you have Coca-Cola trying to present you a sense of community, there's no community there, you know? Their goal is to sell you a product, you know, ultimately. So I feel strongly about that. And I feel strongly because and I'm not saying this out of being self-righteous, you know, oh, we're so good, you know, because sometimes we're not so good, to be honest, you know. I'm saying it out of the huge sacrifices that come with being a nonprofit, right? That it doesn't belong to you. I am the director here today, but the moment I leave this place, I leave with my last paycheck or small paycheck, you know, that we have, and that is it. So I think what I'm trying to say here in short is that we could learn. We should be better at learning from what the for-profit sector does, you know, and take some of the positive things from there, because the for-profit sector, believe me, are taking things from the things that the non-profit sector does, as it is.
Yeah. That was so insightful because admittedly, like, we are set up as a business technically, but like the way you describe that, I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense.
And again, please don't take it out of context. I'm not attacking.
Not at all. No, I'm not at all.
I'm not attacking for it. It's like, go for it. You know, if you're going to start it just out of like getting it going, you're an LLC. And Dublab started it as an LLC at the beginning. You know, it was a limited liability corporation. Yeah, and and over the years we learned, we're like, you know what? There's this thing called nonprofit, and that means that we could be for the public, and we really found our identity in there, and that's when we thrive more. So again, I'm not saying out of like someone for profit, it's evil and all that, but ultimately there is a sense of like it's owned by an individual. You know, Dublab and other 501c3s nonprofit in the US, they're not owned by anyone, you know, and I take that to heart. You know, I really try to tell people all the time, we're not owned by anyone. This is yours. Any volunteer that walks through the door, believe me, I look at them and say, I wonder if this person could be the next director. You know, I can't wait to say, come, please take it over. take it to the next place, pick it up and carry it, so it is a sense of yeah, it's very, to me, it's very important, that thing, because ultimately what matters is what is on paper.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that like really, the other co-founders are, one's doing the stream, the other person's working, but I feel like we're all going to go back and listen to this and just like think about that, like moving forward. That's sounds great. Like everything is really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and every community organization goes through a period of finding their voice, right? And you, sometimes you start just for the sake of being able to cash checks. You're like, oh, let's just form an LLC or something like that, because you can't be cashing out to your name. So it makes, sometimes you go like that, sometimes for 5-6 years, until you find your voice. But you will, this it'll work itself out. You'll find if you are a true community organization, or if you're a business, and if you're a business, you should really just be honest to those that are out there that, yes, we are a business. We're here, to make money, and it's great. There could be genuine community connections there that could happen too.
Yeah, that's so important to think about is like how you're framing that. I've never considered that. That's really good. Okay, I don't want to. What time do you need to go? Is like 10 more minutes okay?
Probably soon, but I have a bit of more time. Yeah,
no problem. Let me think about it. Like, I have so many things that I like wrote down, but like you have been so like expansive with your answers, and it's been great. But like, I'm like, oh, you kind of touched on like a lot of stuff that I've been wondering about. I guess we can kind of wrap this up, because I don't want to take too long or anything, but it's just to wrap it up, like, is there anything else you want to add? Is there anything Dublab has going on that you want to share about, or
well, for us, we are just to kind of give you a quick thing on we talked about the past, we talk about a lot about the present. If I have to talk about the future, I think just talking about what's next for us. This is an ongoing adventure, that every year is especially speaking now on, December, we look forward to the next year, and there's always that moment where like, wow, we did well this year, but next year is another year, right? For us, we are in a moment of transition. We lost somewhat because of the pandemic, related to the pandemic. We lost our home of 18 years. We've been in the same space for 18 years, and December 1st, we moved into a new place. This move was someone telling us that it's time to grow up, although we didn't want to, I wouldn't have moved, because we have a great deal. We had a great landlord and all that. There were changes in that building that pushed us out, and we had to look for a new space. And the new space that we found, it's a bigger space. It's a place that is beautiful. It's definitely a place that will make us look a little more, less Wayne's World style, less, it's a little more, I think it offers the opportunity to project our history better, right? And our, who we are as an organization. And I'm not going to lie, you're a little bit nervous, I was there last night. I was like setting up turntables, and we still have to build walls and all that. We're not going to be up and running until probably early next year, March of 2022. But everything is in boxes. All the furniture is piled up. But I think it's a time that hopefully we'll see, 2022 will see us starting a new chapter. Right. And continue to evolve and continue to define who we are as an organization. You see new voices coming in, and definitely the new voices that are coming in, I make it very clear to them. It's like, come over and feel free to, move things around, physically and organizationally, who we are. It's like when I bring new people, I tell them, don't feel like you can be here and not touch the furniture. Even if a couple of things break, do it. That's part of finding your own voice and defining who we are as an organization, because who we are as an organization will come from the next wave of people, not from me. it will come from that, is that it's 22 years old, that they've been listening to Dublab while in college, and now they're at Dublab working, and they're like, oh, I really want to tell them you can make an impact here. Don't feel like because you can fall into that trap, in the trappings of being an institution, and then you become stale, right? Because no one wants to touch it, because there's something that it's like, no, continue to define it. Tomorrow is a new day, and we start from scratch every day. Yeah.
I mean, that makes that it's great, because you really, really, really emphasize like this belongs to the community. So it will be whatever the community wants it to be, and that's beautiful. That's really exciting.
You have to be able to let it go. Just like give it up. You have to give it up.
Exactly. All right. I think those are like my main big questions. This was like so enriching and great. Thank you so much again. To anyone tuning in, please support our station. Also support Dublab. Tune into both our stations. I can't wait to like stay in touch. And I haven't been to LA, but like I will definitely try to stop by. Hopefully, whenever I go, I want to see the new space. That sounds really exciting.
Please write us. Come meet us. You'll love everyone that works there. Everyone is like really nice. Wonderful people. I'm so grateful. Wonderful people. I'm so grateful for the team that we have at the station, because they're just simply the best. And when you're in LA, please come over. Yeah.
Okay, sounds great. I hope you have a great day. Thanks for